To this meeting, the Housing and Land Delivery Board, and as you have seen, I'm a newcomer. I chaired the Environment and Energy Board for 4 years actually, and have switched to this one. So I'm leader of Solihull Council and obviously a director of the Combined Authority. I would suggest we'll go around the room. I assume everybody can hear me because nobody's pointing anything. So shall we just go around that way, anti-clockwise? Gareth first.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Gareth Bradford, I'm the Executive Director for Housing, Property and Regeneration at the West Midlands Combined Authority.
I'm Jane Francis, Cabinet Member for Housing and Homelessness, Birmingham City Council.
I'm Richard Smith. I'm portfolio holder for planning and regulation at Nuneaton and Bedworth.
I'm Andy Makovich. I'm Cabinet Member for planning and climate change.
Councillor Steve Evans, Cabinet Member, City Housing, City of Wolverhampton Council.
Good afternoon, Richard Lawrence, Director of Regeneration, City of Wolverhampton Council, supporting Councillor Evans.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Colin Clinton. I'm Head of Service, Business and Partnerships, Housing Property Regen Directorate.
Hi everybody, I'm Rob Land. I'm the Head of Strategy and Analysis for Housing, Property and Regen at the Combined Authority.
Okay.
And Wendy Slater, Government Services.
Right. Okay, we'll do that this time. Thank you very much and welcome. First, just apologies for absence.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor for Chair Joe Nugent, but we have online on screen joining us John Mather from Homes England. Apologies also from Kevin Rogers, but also joining us online we've got Councillor Dormer from Redditch, and we've also got Councillor Wayne from Dudley joining online as well.
Okay, thank you and welcome. Welcome to you. Okay.
And we've also got another councillor just joining us now. We're just doing introduction.
We've just done introduction. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Sorry I'm late. Came on public transport. Councillor David Welsh, I'm Cabinet Member for Housing and Communities at Coventry City Council.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much. So we have a number on the screen as well, and you can, I think, see who they are just about from the board. So, okay, I'm going to kick on. Declarations of interests. Nothing, I'll take it. Okay, and substitutes. You'll give me one, haven't you? Yeah. Chair remarks, well, I haven't really got any. They will come out as we go through the meeting, but I've already introduced myself. And I mean, my purpose today, I'm going to be listening and probably asking quite a lot. I don't intend to, I'm still relatively new to this. I'm not new to housing, but I'm new to this. So I, reserve comment on a few things that you might expect me to do on the first meeting. There we are. First of all, the terms of reference, which I think are put to remind us all on pages 1, 2. I think that's just to remind us we're not making any decisions on that. So the purpose is obviously the important thing here to assist in accelerating delivery of housing and employment space, identifying policy freedoms and flexibilities. I think it's an important point there. What I often find is that planning is not always up to planning policy does not always keep up with, the pace of housing delivery, and there may be issues that come out of that. But okay, and then responsible for delivering the land delivery action plan and reviewing it, review it periodically, and for making recommendations to the WMCA board. Okay, so that's terms of reference. Minutes of 24th of April, I wasn't here, so if anyone's got any objections to it, say so, but if not, I shall just move on. I can't see anyone, so Okay, so the first substantive item from Rob is the quarterly report on housing and land deliverables and progress on housing and land annual business plan. Now, we were talking about this earlier, and we thought that it'd be handy to just remind ourselves and remind me of what the deliverables are. So, Rob, I think you have a slide to go on the screen. So if you'd like to show it and just talk us through it.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do that now. Hopefully this is coming up on screen for everybody who's dialed in, and also appreciate
See that.
the writing's not particularly large on the screen.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to talk through, because I can hardly see it myself.
Appreciate it, Chair. And also just to note, within the board report itself, under section 4 is the list of all of these deliverables and then the update against each of them. So it might be worth just referring to the section 4 of the report as I talk these through. So just for a bit of background, the Combined Authority agrees its annual business plan and annual deliverable of the year. It's agreed alongside the annual budget. These deliverables for the housing and land portfolio were agreed in February 23 as part of that process. And we're now into quarter 1, or just at the end of quarter 1 of the delivery against each of these deliverables. So that hence the report today at today's board. So just to kind of go over the kind of main points of the deliverables for this year. Clearly, there was a significant change from February onwards in terms of the agreement of the devolution deal, which was signed in March. So there is a point on the slide here about leading the development and negotiation of the devolution deal that's now been amended to actually delivering the implementation of the Devo deal, because subsequently that was agreed. We've also got targets in there relating to our existing housing deal funds and how we deliver those funds on and report those to government. As you mentioned at the start, Chair, supported local planning authorities with evidence requirements for local plans and other policy requirements. Working to support approved policy development work. So we've got an item today on future house building that fits into that deliverable. Leading, managing and delivering the brownfield regeneration housing and land programmes, and that will be a consistent focus throughout this year, obviously, and we do the additional reports to this board which set out the delivery of each of those funds as we come to each board. Working closely with local authorities and developers, investors and government agencies to develop a strong pipeline, a number of pipelines to bring forward new schemes, and again we'll be talking a bit more about that in a moment. We also lead and facilitate a number of industry-led task forces, which some of you may be aware of, around town centres, future of house building, commercial property, and those are all led by industry figures with a considerable amount of input and intelligence and expertise shared with us, which then help to shape and inform how we bring things forward on a policy point of view. We also have a role around strategic acquisitions, disposals and asset management for the Combined Authority. So what sites is the Combined Authority looking to acquire or dispose of, and how are those assets managed? We work closely to develop new partnerships and joint approaches with public and private sector partners. And Colin, my colleague to the left of me here, leads on the development of those strategic partnerships. There's a deliverable here around affordable housing delivery across the West Midlands, and that was also informed by the devolution deal announcement around the affordable homes programme in 2026. We also have a role at the board to approve and endorse business cases for additional funding to government. So when we've previously been proposing new funding approaches to government, we brought those proposals to the board for endorsement before submitting them to government. The Combined Authority also has a role as the lead for the non-public estate and place the pilots programme in the region, and those are two particular areas of focus around public land and how public land is brought forward to deliver more housing and more regeneration in the region, and the APE board for the West Midlands reports to this board. We have a deliverable around the annual West Midlands investment prospectus, and again, I think that'll be touched on later in the agenda, but that's the annual document that is used to really highlight and demonstrate the key investment opportunities in the region on an annual basis. We work to support local authorities and other partners on policy projects, funding bids and investment plans, particularly around town centres, but in other areas as well, particularly where there are a number of government funding regimes or funding programmes being brought together. We've been involved in that in the past. And alongside that, we lobby and engage with government on a whole range of housing, land and regeneration matters, and quite often have taken proposals or requests from this board directly to government for further discussion. I talked about some of the property side of things, and we're also developing some property estate strategy during this year for a whole asset register for the Combined Authorities estate. We're working closely on the public land chart, the implementation of the public land charter, which also fits in with the devolution deal, and I'll work with the Cabinet Office on a public land and land reform programme for the West Midlands. And then the two final things that are noted here are around leading and developing the future home strategy, and we've got an update on that in the agenda today. And we've also got the work around AMC and zero carbon homes, which does actually fit now into the future home strategy as a whole. So we've brought those two areas of work under the umbrella of the future home strategy. So those are the deliverables. I appreciate there's a lot of text there and a lot of things to think about. As I say, under section 4 of the report that's on the agenda today, there's an update where we've got to in the first quarter against each of those. And also in section 3 of the report, there's a couple of things just brought out in terms of particular delivery during the first quarter. So as I mentioned at the start, there's the devolution deal implementation programme, which is ongoing, and that's very much been brought under the 4 umbrella areas of the single regeneration fund, the land reform programme, the affordable homes programme, and then levelling up zones. And there's an update on each of those in the report itself. Worth noting that those 4 areas of the devolution deal were the 4 main asks from this Housing and Land Board in the last financial year, and those were taken throughout the whole negotiations and agreed within the devolution deal. So a certain amount of success in getting the housing and land portfolios deliverables agreed by government. And then also we've got the ongoing development of the housing property and regeneration pipeline. So a lot of work ongoing at the moment with local authorities and other partners in the region to really over program the pipeline with our funding programs, so that we have a considerable number of schemes within the pipeline for each of those programs, based on the kind of general position of some of those schemes will drop out as the application process goes forward. So we have been making sure that those are all able programmed and working really closely with local authority partners. Colin again leading on that in terms of monthly meetings with all local authorities to identify those priority projects. So those 2 highlights are identified in the section 3, and alongside that, the strategic partner programme. Just to update the board on this strategic partnership that was agreed with Segro, it was agreed in May 2023, which looks to commit £2 billion worth of investment into the West Midlands from the leading one of the leading developers of commercial logistics sites. So those are the main highlights we've pulled out. As I say, there's quite a lot of detail against each of those deliverables in the report. Very happy to answer questions, Sharon.
Yeah, I've got 2 questions. One is just specific and one is more general. Just a reference in levelling up zones, what you've referred to there, there's, fiscal and housing things. The important thing, as far as I'm concerned, for the levelling up zone that, East Birmingham, North Solihull, there's a people element of this. It isn't just about place and money. It's actually, there is health, which probably flows from other things, but there's also a reference that there wasn't, for instance, early years in the original programme. So it's not really the subject of this meeting, but on the other hand, I just want to be clear that I'm not looking at the LUZ as being necessarily just a place-based initiative. Well, it is a place-based initiative, but it's more than just bricks and mortar, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. That's the point. First point is. The second point is just whether we have any views on the flow of the market at the moment, because the press and whatever is sort of seems to be talking the market down. Builders stopping pushing schemes and things like that. I just wonder whether we had any feedback on that. If we don't, we don't. We all read the papers, but if there's anything that you had to say on that. Yeah, Gareth.
If I try and answer the second one whilst recognising it's a public meeting and I don't really want to have any negative impact on market confidence. I think two things. So we have a commercial property task force, which I think most of you know is chaired by Andrew Pillsworth, who's the managing director for SEGRO. And at the most recent meeting, the general perception is there's still a really strong market interest in investing and developing in the West Midlands, which is really good. There was a requirement on a number of sites for public subsidy to unlock those projects, and we knew that. And that is clearly remains the case of the role of the Combined Authority with local councils working together as a partnership to really try and unlock the projects. But what is very clear is particularly when it comes to housing, there's still a very strong housing demand across the region, and investors and developers that we talk to who are both within the region and as well outside the region and are looking to invest in the region are still confident that the fundamentals council courts are still there. I think we will expect just some slight further scrutiny by developers' investment boards before they actually press go on a few projects, whilst they wait and see what the current mortgage market and interest rate inflation is going to be. But at this moment, and I'm sure most councils are seeing this as well, there's still quite a strong interest in the West Midlands and still a strong interest in developing and investing here, which is really good. And we've seen that, Colin, from our side. Again, I need to be a bit careful what I say, but we continue to have a very steady flow of applications for grant funding this year, which is a strong indication of developers wanting to see projects come forward. Towards the end of last year, as we reported to the board, we did notice a slowdown in grant applications coming a period of about 2 or 3 months, and that has changed this year.
I don't believe in ducking these things. I'm very much aware it's a public audience, but
could you put your microphone on, please, Councillor? Yeah.
But I'm also very much aware that of the nature of the West Midlands market, and I'm sort of my own impression is that it is still very strong, and there might be a good reason for that, because when housing is often a discretionary market for some, but it's also a needs market. And what I've found during previous recessions, and I've been involved in many in my lifetime, is there is a very strong underlying market there that indeed meets the sort of product that we are marketing. So I'm interested. That's what I was hoping you would say in response to that point. So yeah.
Just to add one point to that, I think one of the things that is really strong for the region, and again it's been fed back to us by the Commercial Property Task Force, is the graduate accommodation, the graduate levels within the region, the number of universities, the number of graduates coming from our universities, the level of graduate retention, and then the other is coming on Councillor Welsh's point about being delayed by public transport. The feedback we do get though is that transport connectivity and transport infrastructure remains a very strong region for developers and investors investing in this area. So the fundamentals of transport infrastructure, skills, housing are still very strong within the region at the moment, and it's really important to have a strong investment profile. What we will do, Councillor Courts, though, and Robert, I suggest it might be worth putting this into the board papers going forward, is just a market intelligence section, so that members can see what is the Commercial Property Task Force saying about the latest market intel that they are taking to their boards.
Okay, can I ask, has anyone got questions of Rob or anyone on the report, the quarterly report? There's obviously a section in private which we can't have questions on, but on any of the stuff in the public sector, public section rather. Anyone got any questions? Anyone on the screen? Yeah.
Just wanted to say on behalf of the Combined Authority team a huge thank you to members and your officer team. So Councillor Bird at the last meeting specifically asked, could councils submit projects to the Combined Authority for housing and regeneration funding, both affordable housing, employment and residential. And I'm pleased to say that has definitely been actioned. And we have seen a real increase in projects coming forward to Colin and the team from local authority regeneration teams. So just a big thank you to you and all your teams, because we definitely have acted on the request from Councillor Bird.
That's very good, and thanks to Councillor Bird actually for raising that. And by the way, I should have said at the beginning, thanks to Councillor Bird for 4 years of work on this. The most important job of all for me to say thank you, because he's achieved a great deal. I was at the first year or two's meetings, and you know, this is one of the most important programs we have across the region. So well done, Mike. Yeah.
Thank you. My first meeting, so forgive me if the questions completely out of hand. But is there a deadline for applications? No. Okay. So where can I find out more?
So what we'll do is we'll link us between our team and your team in Birmingham, and we'll make sure you've got a list of projects that are coming forward to us. We're really happy to do that with any other member if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Right, Andy.
Yes, I was quite intrigued on page 14 about almshouses and how you work with, you know, so that don't meet the criteria for affordable housing, but yet they do provide a role in the community. How is that linkage done, and what are the opportunities for small little trusts?
Okay, Chair, can I come in on that?
Please.
So the Arms House Association actually came into contact with us via a member of the Housing Landlord who put forward their contact details because they've been talking to the arms houses in their local area. So the Arms House Association is the umbrella group for the arms houses in the region, in the country, and they're very interested in how they might be able to develop more. So they are still developing new arms houses, and they are looking to access housing and funding and other types of funding to bring those forward. So it's a small element, but an important element of the wider kind of sector that we're looking to engage with. So we're in the early stages of understanding what the opportunities are in the region and how they might come forward.
Are there any constraints on the funding, like for instance, you know, transport links, etc.? Because in the rural parts, there is existing almshouses, but they're not well served by public transport.
Again, just through you, there are, it depends which funds in effect, so it depends which funds we're looking to fund through. But as far as I'm aware, through the Homes England Affordable Homes Programme, which might be the way the arms houses go forward, I don't think there are any restrictions around the types of public transport. I know John's on the call today, so he might be able to flag if there is anything on that. But from my awareness, there isn't necessarily any hindrance based on the Homes England programme.
Thank you.
Quite a lot of interest, Andy, in arms. I mean, we've noticed it, you know, small schemes, but, you know, local people wanting to do things. It's quite encouraging. So I hope we publicise all these things as much as we possibly can. I think that's probably for another time, actually, how we market the work that we're doing. We'll get people to engage more. Okay, any more questions? If not, I will move on. And I'm moving on then to future house building strategy, item 8 on page 21. Who's going to pick that up? Gareth?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, in your pack is the latest progress we have made on the future house building strategy. Just to give a bit of background and context to this, West Midlands as a region declared a climate emergency and said that we were going to be net zero by 2041, so ahead of the national government target. We set in the plan for growth, which is the regional's economic strategy, that we wanted advanced manufacture of homes to be one of the key economic clusters. And thirdly, and particularly relevant to this board, is in the housing deal of 2018, we committed to deliver 215,000 homes by 2031, including looking at trying to really fast track the delivery of zero carbon homes and homes built using advanced manufacturing in housing standards. Since that policy context has all been in place, the government has come forward and given the whole industry clarity that from 2025, every house within the country will have to be built to the Future Homes Standard. In 20, you will not be able to get building regs approval for homes without complying with the Future Homes Standard. That has obviously caused, both in the West Midlands and right across the country, developers, investors and public authorities to think, how can they prepare best for hitting that very moving and important target of the Future Home Standard by 2025, which is obviously critical to the net zero agenda, but in this region is also an economic opportunity around our future house building economic cluster. So the Combined Authority set up a Future Homes Task Force, which is chaired by Mark Farmer, who I think is on the line as well. Yes, he is. For those who don't know, Mark for many years was the government's expert advisor on all the issues around modern methods of construction and future house building. And so we're very fortunate within the region that we were able to get Mark to chair our Future Homes Task Force, which involves builders of housing, it involves universities and colleges, it involves investors. So it really tries to involve a number of key partners as well as local authorities within a industry-led task force. And that industry-led task force has been advising us and supporting us on what should the West Midlands do to be ahead of the curve for future homes. We know it's coming in 2025. We know we need to make sure, given our net zero goals, our housing supply goals and our economic goals, that we're going to have to get ahead of the curve. So what you've got in your pack today is a summary of the latest position on the future homes strategy as it's currently written. We often like to talk about it as the advanced manufacture of housing, given the region has such a strong heritage around advanced manufacturing. And for today, Chair, what we're looking for is just an endorsement of the direction of travel of where this is heading, with an understanding that the full strategy will be coming back to the board in September, October of this year, once we've taken further soundings from industry, from universities, research institutions, and of course the local authorities who we're working hand in glove with on the development of this strategy. Chair, I think Mark might want to say just a few words by way of background as the chair of the task force, if that's okay.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gareth. So for me, taking on board everything that Gareth has just said in terms of pre-positioning why we're doing this, for me, it's about leadership. It's about the importance of leadership in the West Midlands, leadership in the sense of the standards to which we build to safeguard the house building industry moving forward. Sometimes it's very easy to be stuck in the here and now, and our industry is notoriously archaic in terms of doing things the same old way, but there's lots and lots of reasons why we have to change, and they range from skills and labour force challenges, productivity, just general capacity issues linked to quality and defects and customer satisfaction of the output that we're producing. And ultimately, there's a much bigger opportunity here in the West Midlands. As Gareth has said, it's linked to the broader economic strategy and the cluster concepts of how we use house building at net zero carbon standards, using advanced manufacture as a means of catalysing the strength of the HEFE sector in the West Midlands. Universities and technical colleges have got a great role to play in supporting all of this, acting as a means of inward investment to try and draw investment into the region to underpin some of the manufacturing innovation that's required. And all of this, for me, is also underpinned by the fact that the industry is starting to do it anyway. So I work with a lot of the major house builders nationally, and I'm seeing that they're all starting to pivot towards the challenge of net zero house building, and they all recognise they have to build in a different way. And what our future home strategy is looking to do is to bring together the idea of modernising the method by which we build with the outcome, which is lower carbon homes, both embodied carbon and operational carbon. And I think it's really important for the West Midlands to stay ahead, because if you look nationally, London is already doing this to an extent with its London plan, and it has quite ambitious sustainability targets that are being conditioned in planning. Manchester, Greater Manchester, is starting to move towards truly affordable net zero as a standard. So I think it's really important if West Midlands is going to stay true to its 2041 climate emergency challenge around net zero, 9 years ahead of national standards. We need to show leadership in how we build, and that means going ahead of national standards in house building. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully that gives you a sense of the context within which this strategy has evolved, and the importance with which I see it on a national stage as well.
Okay, I've got quite a few points on this, so I'll work my way through it. Just a point in terms of the fundamentals of the strategy. Are there 6 or 7? I've got principles there, 4.3. I'm just not sure. Signaling a long-term ambition, is it ambition to do something, or is that ambition I'm not quite sure about that. But let's just go through my list. The building industry is very much market driven, both in terms of a product that you sell, but actually in the supply chain of the components that you use to build those products. And I just wonder how far you have engaged with the building industry, because if the region needs to demonstrate its credential in this, it would be very helpful if we could have the support of major builders or developers in that. It would just help the market move forward rather than it just be public sector. That's point 1. Second point, I do think are we clear on some of the specifics here? Because one thing is a strategy, but a second is what do we see as the outcomes of that strategy, and how do we need a great focus on what will be different and how we will change it? I mean, one of the things on the whole decarbonising journey is, I mean, there's the words net zero. I'm always sort of cautious about how I use them, because they're not a principle to my mind of them just themselves. Decarbonisation is done for a reason, and one of those reasons is tremendous benefits that can be derived from climate change action. And then we need, and that applies to decarbonisation of homes as well. So I think we need to, it's not just a matter we want net zero. It's a matter of what we're getting out of it. And I think one of those is the, as I say, it's the benefits of energy efficient homes. Because I will tell you, I first was promoting timber frame houses in the 90s. So I've been around this for 30 years now. So this is not new, and nor are some of the principles about. I always remember, well, everybody in the building industry is 50 plus. Well, they've all seemed to be 50 plus. They just always, are older, and by the way, largely male, which is an issue. There's a tremendous talent pool by diversifying. In terms of economies, I think decarbonisation can take, you can do it on a whole approach, a holistic approach of doing everything. So you have, one of the most wonderful carbon-free homes, or you can actually look at components and see how progressively we can introduce components. Now, what has the region got to? Components that are, well, they might be UK based, they might be local based, but certainly there's more than just saying it's an energy efficient home. It's actually, you talked about embodied carbon and so on, and I think it's really important that the building industry is one of the least, it's one of the most carbon intensive industries that there is in various ways. One is actually how it uses carbon in its process, but also in its wastage, and circular economy is a vital component of it. I was at a company with Andy Street actually a few weeks ago, one of the big leaders in the cement market, and it was very interesting to see the massive steps they were taking to decarbonise. They're not waiting for us; they're getting on with it, and I think that the more we can illustrate that, it's another thing of bringing the market in. And then you've got, well, why the West Midlands? I mean, you mentioned London, and then you mentioned the West Midlands. Well, there's a good reason for that. We might be in the centre of the UK. I mean, we have a distinct central locational advantage. And I do wonder whether part and parcel of our strategy should be a mini prospectus of statement saying why West Midlands? Well, for all these reasons. A, there's a lot of house building. B, you know, we are in the centre of very well connected, best connected place, and also we have a lot of good industries here, and we've got a lot of good technology. So, you know, we should be saying why West Midlands, and I think that's an important. You know, what has the region got to offer? So I think that's important. I think that I'm probably coming to the end now. At the moment, I think that. Oh, just one last thing, which is a reference to National Brownfield Institute, which is a fantastic place. I don't know who's been there, but question mark, we've got it. I think the capacity there is I don't know, but I suspect is far greater than perhaps we're using. So I think promoting that would be a great thing. And making sure it's fully utilised. But I'll stop there now and take, unless you want to deal with all those, or perhaps best to take all the questions. And did you have a question?
No, sorry.
Oh, right. I thought you had your hand up. That's all right. Right. It was Andy first.
Yeah, thank you. I just reflected on my time in the States when I was in early 90s. I remember we had the Montreal Protocol about changing our CFC gases, and it was great national objective, and we're all worried, you know, in the chemical industry, businesses go out. But in the end, once the decision was made, that's it, 5 years, we acted, and we done it, and we did it in 3, and there was no detrimental, and those businesses who couldn't do it went out of business, and that was good actually. They went out of business. They're probably consuming unnecessary oxygen in the business world. They couldn't do it, so we adapt. So it's very clear that there needs to be no budging on this, and an industry just told, you know, adapt or die. So I'm a bit concerned that we still work on a strategy of 2023 when it's 2025 is the deadline. But when I was in the States, people were building, you know, a house was built in 3 weeks. Never saw a bricklayer at all. No bricklayers. Those houses placed. You know, they put some sand down, leveled the sand, timber frame house, floated on the sand, built 3 weeks. You know, cladded, fully cladded, probably would have been net zero if they wanted it. But so I think, and yet I see, so there's an opportunity for changing the way we're doing. But you know, but for instance, I saw, was it 3D printing of houses? You know, that's now possible. So we ought to be thinking about that. We ought to be thinking about automation in the house building industry and getting that infrastructure in. So we get the robots, get the computers in. So, you know, if you have to have bricks, get a robot to build the bricks. You don't need a man. So we've got no people wanting to do this work, and we've got to face up to the realities. Is we can't keep importing people to build houses. We've been doing it for centuries, so we need to move on. And surprise, surprise, in the 30s, you could buy a house in America on, you know, for a catalogue. You know, flat pack, a Sears house. You filled up and they sent it to you by railroad, and you erected it in a day or 2 days. So I think we need to be thinking more, going back to what America was doing, and thinking back and how we can build and use our technology. You know, using computer-aided design, materials, and actually starting from scratch. Actually, how would we build a house in a modern context? And then making sure we got the international. But actually, in order to do this, what's fundamentally important is that business has a supply. So therefore, we're going to provide this is the market for you to build these houses, and then business will go. Business won't adapt if there's no market for them to build in. So the role of the CA should be finding the land and the market for business to move into that market.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, to a certain extent, I agree with you, not completely. I mean, America is, I've spent about 3 weeks studying house building in America. By and large, their scale is different. You know, take a bit of desert and build in it. You know, we are not in that situation. We have much more local characteristics. But on the other hand, they are much more organised in some things. I think we've got to question our own question mark what our role is. I mean, we're facilitators. I mean, by and large, I don't think land finding might be a bit tricky, but right, yeah.
Chair, I'd be very interested if he's willing to hear Mark Farmer's response to that in a way.
Yeah, well, let's just pause on questions then, and Mark or anyone who wants to come back on the numerous points that have been made.
Yeah, sure. So it's quite a lot there in terms of what you just run through. If I just pick up on that last thread of the conversation around the US experience and that Sears catalogue example, which is oft quoted and, you know, is a really good example of the fact that lots of what we talk about is not necessarily modern in relation to the concept, but for whatever reason we fail to embrace it as a scalable and technology enabled approach. And that's the opportunity now, is to use that thinking of sort of pattern book catalogue approach to housing, which, you know, but by and large, many of the house builders have their own standard house types, but they've never really paired that with the concept of technology, with manufacturing at scale, and trying to drive something which is just a different process. It's always been, here's a standard house type, let's go and procure it in the normal way and use labour intensive traditional artisan crafts on site to deliver it. And for many of the reasons have already been touched upon, that is not a sustainable model. We do not have enough people. We have a big issue in terms of the size of the workforce, the demographics of the workforce, the competence at scale is an issue in itself. So I think, you know, part of this is trying to actually enable productivity to improve so we can actually do more, because not only do we have to build new homes, we have to retrofit a whole load of existing stock, and we have a finite workforce. I think the point about CFCs and that sort of that point of you know, give certainty on what the regulatory environment is absolutely valid. I think this is about, if once you set the framework within which you have to operate, industry will adapt. And that's sort of what we're doing here on a regional level. We're setting certainty and clarity on what the standard is, and we're using whatever tools we have in our armory to influence industry to move towards that. Just going back to some of the earlier points, National Brownfield Institute, I'm a big fan. I'm an honorary doctorate at the University of Wolverhampton, very close to that initiative, and I think it does need to be exploited. Whether there's massive links across to the Future Homes Task Force as it stands at the moment, I think there's actually an ability to further exploit that link, including into the wider HEFE sector. But I definitely think the circular economy piece linked to MBI is really important. I think there was a question about supply chain alignment, and does this strategy speak to the West Midlands manufacturing and construction supply chain? We have done some research about that. So we've looked at capacity studies of who's doing what in the region, who's actually able to deliver what forms of different methods. We've tried to be as agnostic as possible. We're completely agnostic around the methods by which we build. We're setting performance targets which enable people to deliver that through either timber, steel, concrete, bricks. So actually it's quite diverse in relation to not shutting off parts of the industrial sector that exists in the West Midlands, whilst also trying to promote a new sector for inward investment and newcomers. I think the concept of why are we doing this? So this thing about decarbonisation and, you know, what's it all about? It's not for the sake of decarbonising, it's for better outcomes. And our standard, the proposed standard, covers both embodied and operational carbon, which I think is really important. So embodied is about attacking the waste. About 40% of everything we do in our industry is waste, whether that's physical waste or process waste or reworking, and that's all got embodied carbon footprint. So we're looking to attack that, as well as address the operational carbon efficiency of higher performing homes. So that's the outcomes. They're very tangible. And I think that's really where the ambition is, to want to push ahead. So I'm not sure if I've covered all of the points there, but hopefully I've picked up some of the issues that were raised.
Just one further comment from me on the back of what Councillor Courts has said. So when we got our first housing deal, one of the things the government was looking for was how would you leverage the funding to deliver better outcomes than would otherwise have been achieved. They didn't just want to see 8,000 homes. They wanted to see improvements in design quality. They wanted to see unlocking of private investment. They wanted to see wider benefits. We were able to, through the work of this board, demonstrate those wider benefits, and the headline wider benefit we went back to government with was our minimum 20% affordable housing requirement, which we were the first region to set a minimum 20% affordable housing requirement for any devolved housing and land fund money. And the consequence of setting, going back to the councillor's point, the consequence of setting that clarity is we don't get people applying to us for 19% or 18% or 17% because the minimum was 20%. That story was vital to us securing the devolution deal funding for affordable housing, employment land fund, and the support and learning upsets. I.e., the idea that you take funding and you can leverage more than just the immediate outputs to deliver wider outcomes was a big part, Councillor Courts, of the story we went back with. So similarly on this, one of the things, Mark, I think we're looking at is can we use our devolved housing and land funds to try and leverage some of these wider outputs and outcomes as well in terms of getting that uptake ahead of 2025, which is the point you were just raising. And again, if we go back to government in a year or so's time, so we want to give even more devolved housing and land funding and even greater support, one of the things they're bound to ask us is, well, how have you leveraged the funding you've already got to deliver wider policy outcomes, such as tackling net zero, such as tackling supply chains and skills shortages. So I think it is really important in that context of trust that we can take funding and we can deliver wider outcomes and basically overperform relative towards the minimum expected. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, in terms of, I think you have addressed a lot of points I made, but this point about engagement with the industry, you know, I'm an ex-house builder. I've had this stuff thrown at me for 20 years. And, you know, you also have a business to run. You've actually got people to keep employed and you've got a recession to cope with. So, you know, there's different forces at work here. And all I'm saying is that, you know, modern methods of construction are actually part of the equation, but there are other parts to it as well, you know, infrastructure and so on. And there's also the retrofit and things like that. And what I'm saying is you need the buy-in of the industry and all its components as much as possible, because we know what we want to achieve out of this. So I think I had another question. Right.
Okay. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone, for the presentation. My only concern, and I think you said you was going to bring a more concise document forward back in October, which would be good to see, because there's a lot of assumptions in it, and the only trouble with trying to get ahead of the game is when the government keep changing the rules. And let's hope they don't, because it is the right thing to do. Of course it is, and we're obviously big supporters of the MBI, being in Wolverhampton. And I think the university are just advertising for a new commercial director, aren't they?
That's right, yeah.
So hopefully they'll take that forward in a more positive manner, and as you say, raise greater awareness. Just a little bit concerned about any extra costs, because there's always extra costs to any changes, and we don't want to get it wrong because we want to get it right. So I do broadly support the direction of travel, but I want to make sure when the document comes in October, it's a little bit more concise, takes into account some of the cost assumptions, because we all know, don't we, that you're talking about labour and workforce and different ways of doing things. I'm guessing it'll probably push up some of the costs. And I don't want us to jump ahead of the game and get it wrong. I think there should be some sort of pilot, if I'm being honest, as opposed to let's just jump ahead and get ahead before 2025 and then find out that somebody down in London has completely changed the thinking and the rules.
Okay, Gareth, you want to come in now? I mean, inevitably there'll be costs to some things. I think one of the most important thing is having certainty, because the market will, you know, if you buy land, you buy it on a cost basis, and then if that changes, then the whole viability thing goes out the window. So it's important that if something's going to happen in a year or 2 years, you know, that you understand that, because it's been reflected in the land purchase terms for a start. But Gareth?
Yeah, just 2 points from me, and then I guess in a way would be worth asking Mark, given he chairs a task force of developers, investors, and those who are being cited, to make sure that we can manage any cost impacts and that it is an investment to address the councillors' concerns. But just on the point on the documents in front of you, so behind this is a lot of work that's happening with local authority officer teams and industry, the HBF and beyond, through Mark's task force and the work of my team, to make sure it's absolutely clear what is the technical standards that sit beneath this. This is the high level strategic direction. Is this broad? What we're asking today, Joe, is this broadly in the right direction to help inform the detailed technical standards and implementation plans that need to sit above it? That will all come back to September and October. What we didn't want to do is spend the whole of the summer working on the next level of detail if we were going in the wrong direction. So this is to just try and get endorsement that broadly it's in the right direction. Your cost point, though, Councillor, is a really vital point for us, beyond just the sort of narrow view, because we started the meeting talking about headwinds in the market. So the thing we've got to do is continue to provide certainty to the market about what we're expecting, and make sure we have sufficient gap funding to address what it's going to cost to deliver product and deliver programs. But at the same time, Chair, what we are seeing is the whole, as Mark was saying, the whole of the industry is starting to have to invest in this, because they know that it's only, you know, a year and a bit away from actually this becoming a mandatory requirement, not of policy, but of the building regulations. So a legal requirement. And we're not hearing anything from, it seems, coming back to the councillor's point, there does seem to be a strong cross-party agreement in the UK of the need to drive zero carbon building and zero carbon homes. But Chair, I mean, Mark is much more expert on this than me in terms of where the industry is at on this question. But from what I can see in all the major house builders that I talk to, this is a massive part of the change that their boards are making. Can I just add one point, which is I was with one of the most senior investors in the UK last week, and they told me categorically their board just won't let them invest in a scheme that doesn't meet a future home standard, because corporately, given their corporate responsibilities around net zero, they just would not be able to make that fly through their board, however good the scheme was. So I think it's not just the developers, it's also the investors asking the developers to hit these high net zero building standards now, which is a big shift from where we were a year ago.
You'd be surprised how interested the private sector companies are in all the whole range of climate change action. Certainly that's what I find, not necessarily just house builders, but others. I want to take and then Andy.
David, I think we're all kind of like dancing around the same concern that we have in the room around this. And by no means, I'm no expert in carbon zero or anything. I don't know how many people around the room are actually experts. But for me, I've always thought about, you know, what is the art of the possible? What I don't want us to do is take forward a document that has what people describe as ambition, but actually something that isn't achievable by us, and we're hostage to fortune, essentially. I don't want us putting forward a standard that we cannot meet. I'm very aware that, you know, this is supposed to be a partnership document, and I've read in it that we talk about partnership a bit further down the document. Actually, I want to see it centred to the front line, the first thing you read. Actually, this is a combined authority wide strategy with local authorities working alongside with private business, because this is a shared challenge that we all have. What we can't do is subsidise our way out of it and allow business to do, because actually business has to find the solution at the end of the day. It's not the people in this room that are going to find it. So I do have a little bit of a concern around that, because one thing I've learned from having planning in my portfolio is the cake is so big, it's not big enough, and you ultimately can decide where the money goes, you know, what I don't want us to get to the position of is we have net zero houses, you know, whatever that means fully, but then you get half the amount of affordable housing because of it, because a developer's going to say to you, this is how much I've got to spend, this is how much profit I'm going to make, and
Yeah.
you decide where what goes where. Do you want 20% affordable and net zero, or do you want 20% affordable, or do you want 10% affordable and then net zero? Because ultimately, that's, unless you tell me I'm wrong, Gareth, that's ultimately what it's going to come down to, isn't it?
Gareth?
Yeah, if I can answer that. So there's quite an important paragraph in the document and in the strategy which says about phased implementation. That's a really important to come back to both the councillors concerned, councillor Brooks, is that we have to phase the implementation because we have to allow the industry to respond. And that's really, really important. In my personal experience of running the Combined Authority's Housing and Land Funds programme for 5.5 years, if you make the requirements very clear up front, developers and investors can respond to those upfront requirements. If there's any element of negotiation, then they will focus quite hard on negotiation rather than the minimum requirements. So where we've been quite successful is where we've had really strong minimum requirements. Where we've been less successful is where we've had requirements that are desirable, what we would like to see, and that hasn't worked as well. So some of the charters that we published as a board, where we said we want to see evidence of people striving to achieve them, we have not seen the same success with those as we have where they're minimum requirements. So just come back to the councillor's point, there's two bits: phased implementation, the point that the industry is responding now, as Mark was suggesting, to this change. And the third point is we are very, very mindful of the cost implications of this. And I hope you'll see in the next version that we've really addressed those cost points. And that's one of the things Mark's looking at.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the developers. Behind every developer, there'll be a landowner, and a landowner will require the developer to use the cheapest or whatever. So, you know, that there is a point here, and this is why, you know, I do think you talk about phasing, but I think one of the worst things is someone had said 5 years ago you're going to be net zero by a certain time. We'd probably all be already there, and I think it's predicting that certainty. Really, I'm sort of getting a mood here that people are sort of concerned about whether we have got captured the building industry and the behind in all this. I mean, there's an issue of, you know, how much we're going to force on them and how much we take them with us. Did you want to come back in then, Andy, and then we must move on?
Yes, very quickly then two points. So just in terms of, because it's almost like talking about carrot and stick. So set a high standard, people do it. But what are we actually using to enforce it here? Because isn't this standard ultimately controlled through local authority, planning, and it's not, Combined Authority doesn't have any powers to enforce, does it? Then the second point was around, I mean, just come back on your point there, what are investors and builders bringing to the table? Because are they coming to us and saying, look, this is what we want to do, help us do it in some way? Is that the conversation as it's going? Because if that's the case, that's really useful. But they have to bring something to the table. You know, we all bring something to the table. They've got to have something there too. That's kind of my position on this.
Just on those points. So on the second one, yes, we're seeing more and more coming to us saying we want to achieve this standard. We know we're going to have to achieve this standard. How can you help us achieve that standard? That is generally the conversation we're having at the moment. Go back to your first point, and I think we've done a lot of industry engagement, but I think if I've understood your question is more, there's going to be a funding gap. How are we going to fill the funding gap that it might cause, or there could be a cost increase, and how we're going to address that? I just want to make sure I've understood. Chair, I just want to make sure we've understood. So there's one which is industry engagement, which Mark and the team are doing a lot with builders, investors, and developers. There's a second issue, which is, will it create a cost on development? And is that the question you're asking that you want us to? I just want to make sure we go away really clear, because there's some two different questions.
How is this enforced? If you're saying you're setting a high standard,
that's it.
How is it enforced? Because I suspect it's through local government planning policy, not Westminster Combined Authority.
I don't know. I don't know. It is planning policy. I don't know how you can do it through planning policy, because unless it's in your local plan or sanctioned by government, you know, the developer can take, you know, can take the local authority to appeal, and they can't justify it. You know, that's, I don't, I mean, enforcement, I'm not sure about that. And the other thing is, you know, we can say what we like, but the land market is a competitive thing. You know, you're going to get a number of developers competing for a product that's in short supply, and they will have to use the most economic things they can to price their developments. Which is why I think if you say everybody's got to do something, at least it creates a level playing field.
So I think we're not a planning authority. The 2025 standard will be improved through building regulations. The only way the combined authority can influence and shape what developers and investors do on the ground is the same way we've done with affordable housing. It's the same way we've done historically around density and efficient use of land, which is through our funding and the conditions that come with our funding, and through the soft capital that we use, particularly around strategic partnerships and other similar arrangements we have where we're getting involved in projects or devolution or other aspects, because we're not a planning authority and that's not our role. But that's how we've enforced it.
Okay, Andy?
Yeah, I just want to come back on some points. Yeah, from my engineering background, engineers respond to a challenge. If you don't have a challenge, they'll go back to what they know. And the building industry has not been challenged for decades, apart from yourself and you probably, and it just needs.
I agree with that.
No, but we still use brick. You still, use men to, too much labour. And you say, actually, I spoke at a conference. I went to an exhibition, and they said to me, "Yeah, we can build a pilot scheme. Pilot scheme always ends up being more expensive. The trouble is, but if you made it, you have to do it. Then there'll be innovation. That's the role. In consultation with the CA, with the consultation of the industry, is actually how do we reduce costs of build? And it might be, different types of manufacturing methods, different types of building, reducing waste, using more standard materials. So I think that's where the challenge is to get that engagement and provide that thread, the industry to think. But once I think, I'm a great believer, if you let the free market will meet the challenge. Always will, always has done. And I think that's what we need to do. And the role of the government is to actually provide the pathways for the market to meet that challenge.
Right, okay, are we done? Anything else? No one else. So, Mark, do you want to come back on anything? Let me give you the last word.
I'll probably just close by saying this whole carrot and stick thing is quite important in terms of change drivers and the dynamics of change. And I've been trying to change the industry now for 7 or 8 years, and I've seen the difficulties and the opportunities of doing that. I would say there's 3 things at the moment that are coming together and converging in a way that I haven't seen before, which means that this sort of opportunity to positively shift construction. I hear everything about the commercial and cost sensitivities of this, and as a QS, I'm acutely aware of costs and viability, but this is about managing transition. And the 3 things that are driving change are a growing awareness that we have a skills crisis, a labour force challenge that we have not seen before, that's not going away, it's only getting worse. There is the regulatory environment around zero carbon via the Future Home Standard, and probably more coming after that, including embodied carbon regulation. And then lastly, point that was being picked up somewhere in that conversation just now about ESG, and the investors actually are making calls outside of the regulatory framework. And actually this is also affecting the top publicly listed house builders. So part of why the top 3 house builders have all started to pivot towards off-site manufacture is partly because of Future Home Standard, but it's also partly because their investors are demanding that they decarbonise how they build homes. You put all those 3 things together, you have a sort of inevitability that the industry is going to change. So this is about managing that transition, mitigating the risk of costs increase in the short term, putting the West Midlands at a competitive disadvantage, levelling the playing field. That's a really important element of this, using land, procurement mandates and strategic partnerships to drive change in the way that we need. So I've enjoyed the conversation, and certainly there's, you know, if there's any requirement for further enhancement or the detailing out of what we need to do, then obviously very happy to do that as chair of the Future Homes Task Force.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we've gone through it enough. I'm very keen that our competitive position is, I mean, nobody commented on that, but our competitive position, why the West Midlands comes out better than it, you know, that is a key aspect of not just for the development industry, but for the supplier industry as well. Okay, all right, thank you. We'll be coming back to it. So another time. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you. Move on to town centres. Update and direction. Page 33. I mean, very interesting paper. I see this whole issue of the town centres revolves around 3 words begin with O. That's good, isn't it? But 3 O's. But about opportunities, because there are incredible opportunities to improve, well, not just town centres, but then there are the obstacles to that, which are often very complex, and they often are due to the third thing, which is ownerships, because often the ownerships is quite complex. It's not just whether you own the freehold, it's whether there's a chain of leaseholds, or as we had to do indeed in Kingshurst, where we lots of flats that we didn't own, so we had to, or there might be rights away and stuff like that. So it's opportunities, obstacles, and ownerships, and in the end, what is the nature of the intervention that can be made? Because, you know, interventions are not easy, because fundamentally it's the market that will drive what interventions are possible, and we need to work with that. So with that, Gareth, who's...
Yeah, if I just introduce this item, so we've had quite a lot of conversations at Housing and Land Board on how can the CA add value to what local authorities are doing in town centres. Huge amount of work being undertaken by local authorities, particularly with towns funding and future high street funding. And obviously the CA does a lot of work where we've got numerous schemes that are coming to us in town centres wanting to secure devolved housing and land funding. We previously, Chair, brought a paper here which was around developing a town centre policy, and I think the view of the board was that that wasn't a role that the combined authority should take, but where the combined authority does have a role is in promoting town centre projects to developers and to investors and others, like we've done with the investment prospectus, and to addressing the 2 points that you raised, Chair, which is how can we overcome obstacles that are preventing delivery of key town centre projects, and how do we use some of our funding to overcome some of the ownership issues within town centres. So we have taken soundings from local authority officer and regeneration teams, and we have tweaked this paper a few times to make it more specifically in that space of where the CA can add value in promoting town centre projects and supporting the delivery of town centre projects. And it is worth saying, Chair, that we have cited the Town Centre Task Force, which is chaired by Rob Groves, and they also consider that this is an area where the combined authority could offer real added value around promoting, supporting the delivery of town centre investment projects, rather than coming up with new policies or new strategies or new frameworks or anything like that. So that's hence, at this stage, we're just asking for a steer from the board so that we can continue to go away and work on something equivalent to the investment prospectus, which previously came to this board and was fully endorsed and championed by the board for the whole region. So that's the purpose, that's the role, and that's what we would welcome any early sights or views from the Housing and Land Board on. It also relates back, Chair, to one of the deliverables that Rob raised earlier in the meeting, which is around the delivery of brownfield regeneration projects, including within town centres.
Okay, so what do we think about the idea of prospectus then? Yep.
Listen, you know, it's always difficult, isn't it, for every town, city centre is uniquely different. Whilst a lot of people have said over many decades. You know, they all look the same up and down the country. I think we know that where a lot of high streets have had to reinvent themselves, it ain't just about the buildings, is it? It's about leisure. It's about the offer. And I've seen up and down the country a lot more, if you like, individual and local needs being met as opposed to the traditional names that you used to associate with high streets. I think, you know, I wouldn't want it to just be a policy document that says, you know, this is a nice thing to do. You know, if you got some Devo deal funding, you know, you want to do something with it. You know, and we're happy to support the direction again, but I don't want it to be just a nice little chat about every 3 months up on the first floor, Summer Lane. And then we talk about, yeah, we got some funding and wouldn't it be great to do X, Y, and Z? It'd be nice if you got some really good, clear examples of interventions. And we know in the past where we've had like one magnet puller, it pulls in others and it can completely transform your town or your city centre, can't it? So I'll be interested to see what you're going to do with the money. And I know it's about partnerships. We can't do anything without investors, of course we can't. We can't do anything without the landowners or overcoming the obstacles and all of that. But if we got some money, let's try and make a difference. And I'll be interested to see some nice examples, whether it's Coventry, whether it's Warsaw, or indeed Wolverhampton, or Solihull for that matter, Chair. And Dudley, maybe even Berry Hill. Shopping centre.
Yeah. So just with our current programme, we've got lots of examples of town centre projects we've unlocked through our funding, whether that's Portersfield and Cavendish House in Dudley or Bull Street in West Brom. So we can give you lots of examples, and we've got lots of projects in the system at the moment. So schemes in the centre of Telford, schemes in the centre of Shrewsbury, all coming forward for town centre projects. I think the big issue that we have flagged in the Town Centre Task Force have flagged to us is like the regional investment prospectus, which we'll make sure everyone has got a copy of, which we use to promote these projects so that we can unlock private sector investment into these town centre projects to supplement the public sector funding that we're putting in through the Combined Authority. There is a view, there is a position that it would be really helpful to have something similar for the different town centre projects across the region that again we could promote and we could shine a light on, recognising the point the councillor makes that every town centre is different and all the projects are bespoke, which I think is a really fundamental point. And again, if you look at the regional investment prospectus, that comes across very strongly in terms of those. In terms of added value though, so if I use the investment prospectus as an example, which is the only corollary I've got at the moment, the first investment prospectus I worked on in this region was in 2018. And if you look across the region now, a lot of those projects that were in that investment prospectus that were called coming soon or ones to watch, you can walk around them now because they're built out and they're delivered. And again, it would be good to do the same on this town centre programme. So in terms of the devolved housing and land funds, which was the question raised by the councillor, we have got a lot of projects in the pipeline for that devolved housing and land funding, and subject to meeting the terms and conditions of that funding set by national government, we will be able to deploy that funding to those projects. But this is about, can we use this to showcase the opportunities that exist?
Yeah. I mean, this isn't about saying there's a pot of money, what shall we do with it? That is not what it's about. This is about, you know, it appears that the previous deliberation said, well, you know, there's a limited role here for the CA in this, but one of those roles could be to highlight opportunities that everyone might have across the region. And, you know, hopefully demonstrate the potential for private investment, which at the end of the day is going to dwarf anything probably the public sector does. You've really got to get that, you know, whether it's retailers or leisure or even the housing, you've really got to get those interests, without which, you know, you can do a bit here and a bit there, but it won't be the drivers of all this.
I'll just come back, please, Chair. Just for my own understanding, in terms of some of the projects you did, I think said 2018, who decides where you invest that money from the Devo deal? And what projects you support or what land you go out and buy and think, yeah, that could be a good investment for the future? Who actually has made that decision?
So all decisions on devolved housing and land funds are taken by the CA's investment board, chaired by Councillor Slay, and with all constituent and non-constituent members represented.
Okay.
But hang on a bit, it isn't that Councillor Slay or the investment board says, let's go for that scheme. What is the process is, people make applications. If you have a scheme or anyone has a scheme and, and puts in an expression of interest, and then it will go through, and if it meets all the criteria, then it gets to the investment board. The investment board is more of saying, yeah, this fits the criteria and we're okay, or it doesn't. The investment board doesn't pick these things. You have to apply it, really.
To Chair, I think we probably need to come back to the board and present the process that we did previously, that says that the process is put in an expression of interest. Then we have a business case process subject to meeting the mandatory requirements, and we had a paper that came to this board, Councillor, that sets out the specific requirements funds have to meet. Subject to meeting those requirements, those projects secure the funding. But the key is meeting the mandatory requirements set to us by central government for those funds. So to give you a few case study examples, every project has to achieve what we call a benefit cost ratio of 1:1. Every project has to be in market failure under the Treasury's test. We have to be the funder of last resort. So just to give you,
but Gareth, it still requires people to make applications to be vetted.
Yeah.
This is the point. So and we indeed encourage applications. We want a big pool of applications to look at. Okay.
Get some ready for you.
Yeah, get them warmed up. Okay. Right, Andy wanted to come in and then
just to support the prospectus, I mean, it's the way forward. But just on the definition of town centre, it's a broad definition, isn't it? It's an area of population that people coalesce around. So it can be from anywhere, really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very challenging. I think it's very challenging to have a policy on high streets and town centres, because as we've seen from the pandemic, things have changed an awful lot of how people use their high streets. I mean, it's really good to have intervention with putting people's flats and houses in town centres, so they've got that market already established for the commercial units and retail that are there. But I do think the old way of building town centres and having businesses built around them, where they used to all go for their lunches and get their drinks, is finished now because people are working from home. So the idea now is mainly to try and get people living in the middle of the town centre, and that's how you can regenerate. But also, you don't want a town centre full of hairdressers and nail bars, because that's what people need to go and have done, because everything else is online. And that's the how we, the commercial aspect, how we help retail get back into the market, because there's nothing better than the whole high street. I remember when I was growing up, I mean, we had some new towns from unit Open Gates, which in Telford, I mean, you could get anything you wanted from Open Gates, and I lived in a village just outside, and that was our main shopping centre. Now everything's at the town centre, and if you go to Open Gates, it's pubs, takeaways, hairdressers, and so the investment we're putting in to help the theatre there is going to be fantastic. But we've got to make those living spaces, which we're doing there, to make sure people are living there and using the retail offer that's there. So I think having a policy is going to be something that has to change, because people's way of living's changed an awful lot from the old way of us thinking people would go to the shop down the road.
I mean, it's absolutely right, and the whole way of life has changed. I mean, I think we need, just be clear on this, because 3.3 comments on what this board, this organisation has decided to do, and the conclusion is that what we're doing here is being able to showcase the opportunities that anyone might have, because I mean, it's interesting. I mean, housing. I know people talk about housing in town centre, but when you get housing, there's nothing else ever will go there. And much as we need housing, the number of people, the actual business that's generated by 100 units is possibly not as much as you'd think. Now, theatre, now you're talking. If you have theatres, leisure and all those things. But a lot of this, in my opinion, is to create a place in a centre or a town centre that people like being in. And that's the key to all this. You want a centre, some of it's public realm, some of it's, you know, making it feel good, the architecture. It's a place that people want to be in, because if people want to be in there, someone's going to sell them coffee and meals and all the overpriced things that people seem to buy these days that they don't need, you know, if you know what I mean. So that I think is what this is about. I think the ideas will not necessarily come from the prospectus, but it will be a good means of marketing all of what we've got to offer. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to ask what the investment board has said about it, because clearly we've got a role to play from land and housing, whichever way around, it's housing and land delivery board. But I'm very interested in what the investment board had to say about it, because my colleagues on the other side of the regeneration would be leading on that side of it. From my perspective, I suppose it's about how the combined authority works with local authorities, not necessarily how the local authorities work with combined authorities.
Apologies, Chairman, I quite understand the last point, but on the first point, yes, look, what we would do, same as we've done with the regional investment prospectus, Chair, would bring it here first, and then if this board was happy with it, we'd then take it to the investment board for their endorsement, as we've done with the regional investment prospectus. And as you say, the projects will come from the local partners, whether that's developers or local authorities or other partners, and then we'd use the prospectus to showcase them. Just come back to the councillor's earlier point, I suspect many of those projects will be repurposing projects, and we'll look at different uses within the town centre to what has historically been a use within the town centre. So it's that opportunity to showcase those projects and some new ways of thinking as well.
So it's supporting others. It's a service. It's supporting others. So the combined authority is trying to help with us there. I don't think it's the other way around. That's what the point of the prospectus. Okay. So I hope this is helpful. I mean, everybody, I think we've probably got a consensus that we want to do it. Tim, you got your hand up. You're not round the board, but I'm a generous sort of bloke normally. If you've got a brief.
Well, I'm only here to ask if this board could insist that at the next meeting on the agenda, there is a report about High Plateau, which is in Brierley Hill Town Centre. It's 23,000 square metres of wasted housing land. And this has gone on since the 1990s. Please, Chairman, could you authorise, insist a report is submitted this time on High Plateau, which is what it's called.
Okay, I know nothing about that myself. I'll ask inquiries and see whether it's something that is available. Okay.
Just wanted to come back. So I don't think I'm in favour of a prospectus actually, unless I'm seeing you on Friday. I think it'd be worth us having a conversation. I think it's Friday. Worth us having a conversation about it. Local authorities have a prospectus for their area, don't they? They know what they're going to do within their area. And I don't know if the combined authority doing it adds anything in that way. I'm open-minded at the moment, but the minute I fall more on the side of I don't know what a prospectus actually brings.
You can leave yours out if you like, and everybody else can be interested.
Well, always don't do one.
Okay.
But I mean, it's
okay.
Something like the regional investment prospectus, isn't it? That we publish a regional investment prospectus that showcases important investment opportunities across the region, and because it's done we see a high profile of that document, and it definitely does attract a lot of commercial investment. But yeah, happy to discuss how we can make sure that it works in tandem with and is complementary to whatever's happening within local authority areas.
I mean, we've got a recommendation here to consider and endorse that and support the proposal to take forward the investment prospectus. I'm just keen to people thinking that's something that we want to support. We've got one not sure, possibly a naysayer, but is anyone can I ask if people broadly in support of the prospectus?
Yeah.
So that's two of us.
Yeah.
Two of us. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't got an issue. but it is about working on projects, as you said, bespoke to us. We're aware of land that was bought.
Yeah.
There was no consultation with the City of Wolverhampton Council, and there's no funding for it. It's doing nothing.
Okay.
That's why I was asking who made the original decision, but you've told us, you know, the projects or anything we want to throw in comes to the investment board. I'm sure that was the way it worked at one point, but
Okay.
I hear what you're saying going forward, and that's the way.
All my time on this, I'm afraid, you know, I'm sort of picking up.
I just said we're happy to support the travel direction.
Okay, so I think we got broad support with some one or two slight reservations, but broadly supported. So is that, you got your?
Yeah, that's really happened on council worship, but I think we will continue to sit down with individual local authorities wherever there are any concerns to make sure that the prospectus definitely does add value to what's happening.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we want to add value. We don't want to do anything that doesn't add value. So we're now excluding the press and public from the meeting on the basis that it involves the disclosure of exempt information relating to financial or business affairs of any person, including the authority holding that information.